Hello, and welcome to another episode of Boundless Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Ruff, and today we have another two amazing guests introduced now. Dr. Estrelita van Rensburg is a qualified physician and pathologist who spent the first part of her professional career as a professor in laboratory medicine and virology in South Africa. After a decade and a half, she moved into the pharmaceutical industry, where she held a senior global position at a large pharmaceutical research organization. More recently, her focus has shifted away from treatment-based medicine into the field of nutrition and preventative medicine. Issy Warrack is a commercial property surveyor by profession and an entrepreneur at heart, and always had enjoyed an active and varied lifestyle. It came as a surprise to her when she developed serious heart issues, which over time were not responding to prescribed medication. Her interest in holistic medicine led her and her business partner, Dr. Rensburg, to explore the healing properties of healthy nutrition, which was a revelation. This led to Wellness EQ, a company specializing in health and wellness. In 2020, the two of them published their first book together entitled Eat Well or Die Slowly, Your Guide to Metabolic Health. Estrelita and Issy, what an absolute honor it is to welcome you to Boundless Body Radio.
Thank you, Casey. It's really nice to be on your podcast.
It's really great to meet both of you. I was just telling you offline, you guys were referred to our show by one of my really good friends, Finlay McLaren. He runs the Chatting Fit podcast. And he got off the line with you guys and immediately emailed me and was like, you have to interview these two. And Finlay has earned enough clout with me that if he says to do something, I'm going to do it. And I didn't even need to vet you guys out. I didn't even look into you whatsoever. I just knew that day I had to send you an invite, and here you are. So thank you for coming.
Well, you know, Casey, it's interesting because he said exactly the same about you. He said we actually had to be on your podcast. So it all works beautifully.
That's fantastic. I love that. I'm so excited for that episode to come out on his show, the Chatting Fit podcast. But I'm also really interested in your story. You guys have a very, I don't know, kind of came at this in different ways, but landed on the same thing. So before we get into each one of your stories, how did you meet for the first time?
That's a great question. We actually met at a business networking event here in Edinburgh. I'm sorry, I can't quite remember how many years ago, maybe about 8 or 9 years ago. And that's where we first met. And, you know, leading on from that, we discovered that we had common interests.
Yeah, definitely. So let's hear some of your story, your individual stories. Either one of you can go first.
You go first.
Okay, I'll start. Yeah, so you actually read out my summary there, Casey. And I originally from South Africa, where I studied medicine, and I specialized in infectious diseases. So it's way far away from what I'm doing today. And I did a lot of research, academic medicine, and so on. And eventually I went into the pharmaceutical industry that brought me over here to the UK. Traveled around the world for quite a number of years. And latterly, I kind of made a big change because I didn't want to just remain in traditional medicine where, you know, doctors, you know, see how they can treat patients and how many medications they can prescribe and so on. And I thought there's something else that, you know, we can do. There need to be something that we can do to prevent all these chronic diseases. And that's when I started reading up and researching nutrition. I initially didn't think it was going to be a very interesting topic. It wasn't really something I was interested in at all. But once I discovered that there's such a lot of misinformation out there, and it's not only, you know, for the general public, but even in the medical field, thinking about what we were taught at medical school and what they don't teach at medical school. I mean, it's absolutely shocking. And I think that really galvanized my interest, and I really dug into the science of nutrition, and I find it absolutely fascinating. So that's what we do these days, you know, interested in metabolic health and interested in helping people, you know, informing them what they can do to improve their own metabolic health, because it's really up to us.
Yeah, it really is. Reading about it turned into writing about it. I think that's really wonderful. I have a few questions for you on some of those notes. So what is the vibe like inside the world of pharmacy and the pharmacological world? Like, did you, we all on this side of the system, we blame the system. We say the medical system sucks, the pharmaceutical companies suck, like they're all problematic. But really, you guys are doing you were doing the very best to try to help people at that time. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, anybody working in the pharmaceutical industry, we can't just say, what they're doing is not good. Of course, they're doing a lot of good, for the global population, because, they're producing medicines that's really necessary and help people. So they do a lot of good. Unfortunately, there are also medication that's produced which only treats symptoms. And I suppose we're going to talk about that a lot in this podcast. It's not really addressing the underlying condition of what's causing, metabolic disease in this instance. But we need to understand that the pharmaceutical industry, they're private companies. They actually need to perform for their shareholders. And I think that's where the conflict starts, because they have to push as many of their medications and develop more and more versions of medications so that they can be profitable and grow their companies. But not everything that they produce, I think, is in the best interest of the population. Depends on the type of disease, that they're producing medication for. So there is this conflict of interest. The other important factor also to know is that the pharmaceutical industry do have a great influence on in medical schools and medical training. They're a very important factor. They sponsoring a lot of research. They make use of key opinion leaders. They usually in academia, so they identify people that has got stature in the academic world. To help support the medications that they produce. So there are a lot of conflicts of interest, unfortunately, in the pharmaceutical sphere. And I mean, we're not even talking about the food and drinks companies. I mean, that's another area where there's a lot of conflict of interest.
Yeah, those two go hand in hand for sure. So I think we also have the idea that these drugs can be so concentrated and powerful, they're going to have the most effect of anything we do. I'm wondering if when you first started studying nutrition, you probably thought that this is not going to move the needle nearly as much as pharmaceuticals could, right? Is that part of why you thought studying nutrition would be a bit boring?
I must say, when I started with studying nutrition, I didn't even think about the pharmaceutical industry, to be honest. I was, for instance, stunned about, reading the whole history of fat and cholesterol and where that myth comes from, that fat and cholesterol is really the cause of heart disease, and, it clogs up your arteries and you're going to have a heart attack. That's what we all believed, and I was shocked that I adjusted my diet through my adult life and, use low fat, for instance, dairy products, because we were all scared of the fat. And even today, when you speak to people, most of them, no, I'm using low fat, they've all heard the message, all using it. And I think that's where it started for me. So I wasn't even thinking about the pharmaceutical industry. I was just really shocked to see what we learned at medical school and how this myth is perpetuated, on and on and on it goes. And I think most probably of the medical profession still believes that. And that to me was the big shock. And I think that was part of the reason why we decided to write the book, because where do you start? How do you counter the amount of misinformation? We hear it on the radio every week. We read it in news articles, the television, wherever. it just carries on and on and on, and it's an avalanche. So what can we do?
Yeah, no, this winter has been very cold where I am here in Utah, and so I've shifted my walking outside into walking inside in a community center. And it's fine. It's nice. It's not super cold or icy. But my least favorite part about walking there is they've got 3 televisions that people have set to either financial or CNN or whatever. And the news, you get a sense. It's all the news stories. It's all the commercials in between the news stories that are promoting either drugs or food products. And you're right. It is completely, you can't get away from it. And you kind of take it for granted if you're not really around TVs very much, like I'm not. And so, yeah, I'm really looking forward to get a lot warmer here for many reasons. That is definitely one of them. And Estrelita, before we leave your story and talk to you, Issy, I want to know, were you suffering from any type of medical issues at the time? Either something that was diagnosed or just something you can look back in hindsight and say, wow, this was a lot worse than what I thought.
Yes. Well, actually, especially when I worked at the pharmaceutical industry, the job was extremely stressful. I traveled globally, bad eating habits, had to rely on restaurants and hotels and so on. And my health started to deteriorate. I mean, not so much that I developed diabetes or anything. And I thought I just had very severe menopause, thinking that was the cause of some of my symptoms, and it was only in retrospect, now that I understand metabolic disease, I understand that I was profoundly insulin resistant, and that I was insulin resistant for many years before that, undiagnosed. I mean, this is a condition that is almost never diagnosed. Yet we know that in the West, in the US and UK and so on, countries like that, that 70 to 90, up to 90% of the adult population is insulin resistant. And it's something that's never diagnosed. So definitely that for me. And that was a wake-up call for me, and say, my goodness, if I just knew then what I know now. And also, I feel so much better, So although I was pushed into researching nutrition, and that was specifically after friends and close family members, developed more severe diseases, that kind of pushed me. But then I discovered that, I had insulin resistance as well.
Wow. And you're right. Like it's so normal, it's average when it's not normal. You know what I mean? If you see it around, you'll just think like, oh yeah, everybody's experiencing this, my niggling aches and pains, and you added weight over the years and brain fog and all that stuff. It's just like, yeah, this is just getting old, when it's absolutely not. There's a real issue going on. Well, thank you so very much for sharing your story. I really appreciate that. Issy, you also had, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to mention something, Casey, just what you said now is, it's so absolutely true. People think when we get old, these aches and pains and symptoms are normal. It's not normal. And that's the kind of almost a light bulb moment. It doesn't need to be like that. But anyway.
Yeah, no, that's such a good point. Thank you for adding that. I really appreciate that. Issy, you're up. You actually did suffer through some health issues. Explain kind of what your diet was like growing up. Were you kind of in the same boat, a lot of the low-fat stuff? Did you feel like you were following guidelines?
Can I go back to the beginning? Because actually, I grew up on a farm, and we were just talking about this earlier today with someone else. And, we ate healthily. I mean, I grew up in an environment where, meals were freshly prepared. We used fresh produce. We didn't have any processed foods. We were in the country, that there wasn't anything. So we had, meat and veg, and, we had no processed foods. I didn't actually see any processed foods until I was a late teenager, when I moved to the city. So, I grew up really healthily. However, things went downhill a little bit after that, because I discovered actually that the taste of pizza was really nice. I discovered the taste of all things that actually contain sugar or break down to sugar eventually actually all taste good. So the journey from then on, for the next 20 years, people kept saying to me, you'll start to put on weight when you're 35. And I said, don't be ridiculous. You know, I'm sporty. You know, I windsurf. You know, I walk a lot. You know, there's no way that I'm going to put on weight. Well, it took 5 years later. I was maybe just about 40, right? And the weight started to pile on. And, you know, it was a few pounds here, a few pounds there, but actually they all added up. I would just say, actually, at that point in time that I had actually become pregnant in my late 20s, and I had immense fertility issues. Perhaps Estrelita will explain a little bit more about that later. And I was also preeclamptic. I had a condition called preeclampsia. Now, I didn't know then what was the cause. I thought, this is extraordinary. You know, I'm actually fit and healthy, etc. So move forward to the 40s, and I just started to feel unwell. Like Estrelita, I probably thought it was the menopause. I thought, well, you know, maybe I'd had a hysterectomy, so I thought, well, maybe I'm having an early menopause. You know, but aches and pains and sort of things started to happen. You know, didn't sleep terribly well, a bit of brain fog, had a busy career, brain fog wasn't very useful, you know, and then one or two blackouts, you know, blackout episodes where, you know, I come to on the floor, no idea how I got there. So there were things starting to happen, but I ignored them because I thought I was fit and healthy. However, you know, the doctors thought, well, maybe there's a problem. I did have rocketing high blood pressure, sky high blood pressure. So that's when the medication started. I didn't realize actually that also then actually later on actually caused more aches and pains than what I'd had before. But, you know, so, and I was told I was on meds for life, right? So the story goes on. Then I collapsed twice. I was in emergency ambulance twice. And the solution there was medication. I was put on about 4 or 5 different meds. I didn't know whether I was coming or going. Nobody really knew what the problem was. They really didn't. And so the medication seemed to do the trick, kept my blood pressure down. That was one thing. But a few years later, then the biggie arrived. I had massive heart palpitations and I felt really unwell. I would black out, especially when I was traveling. I could black out on the plane. I could actually black out anywhere, which resulted in 2 fractures, one in my ankle and one in my shoulder. And I was referred to a cardiologist, and he was concerned. So was I, but he was concerned, and he said, I think the only thing we can do is actually insert a permanent heart monitor, a permanent cardiac monitor, to find out what's happening. Now, I said, well, what does that involve? It's a tiny little operation, and it basically monitors the condition of your heart. Well, the answer to that was, we found out what was happening, and the cardiology unit rang me. They said, are you all right? I said, yeah, I'm fine, thanks. And they said, well, you know, you've had an incident. And the incident was that my heart kept stopping. Now, I don't know whether you've ever thought about your heart stopping, but my thought was I was petrified that actually it wasn't going to restart. Petrified. And, you know, I thought I'm too young to die. There were all sorts of things went through my mind. And at that point in time, Estrelita, who mercifully had actually been studying nutrition, said to me, you need to change your diet. I can stop there and continue on a bit, but would you like me just to continue and finish the story?
No, I did want to ask you about the heart monitor. I saw it on your website. Your story that you put up there is absolutely wonderful, by the way. I recommend anybody listening to go and actually read the whole thing. How big was the monitor? It looked like it was maybe like the size of my thumb.
Yeah, it's smaller than your thumb, about 2/3 of my thumb.
And where did they put it? How did they insert it?
It's just inserted just above your heart, just here, subcutaneously.
Wow. So that had to be very uncomfortable. It had to be extremely terrifying to hear that your heart was stopping. And you know, having the medications initially work pretty well, and now you've got a device installed and all of these things, you know, they might not have a lot of answers for you, but they're at least hopefully getting you in the right direction. what made you guys decide to talk about nutrition? Like, Estrelita, why did you think that nutrition was going to be able to help her?
Well, because there was really just no explanation. But at that stage, I knew enough to think, well, what we were eating was not optimal, and I was thinking, there may be something to it, and now's the time to test it out. So when I suggested that she change her diet, I said, well, let's do it together, because it's always good to have a buddy when you start with something new. And that was good as well, because we kept each other, on the program, and motivation. All of those things are very important, especially in the beginning when you don't know what what's going to happen. And I must say that the results started so quickly. Within the first week to two, you could already feel differences. And people that go on a very low carbohydrate diet know that. I mean, we get it from people that go on our program within the first week.
Yeah.
The results kept pouring in. And Issy can talk about that, but her heart, I think probably after a month or two being on a low carb program, there were no more cardiac incidents, and it's up to today. I mean, we're talking about a few years now.
Yeah,
how many?
4.5.
4.5 years, no cardiac incidents. And I think after 4 months, she could stop her blood pressure medication, because she monitored that and we documented that. And there was just absolutely no reason to keep on with the blood pressure medication. And she's been off that as well. That was the only thing that she changed. And I mean, many other symptoms that you can talk about also improved.
Yeah, I would love to talk about all of those. Issy, did you think that Estrelita was crazy when she was telling you that like nutrition could actually help you and all of these other things were seemingly not helping you?
Listen, I was quite conflicted, let's put it that way.
Okay.
I trusted her. She's a brilliant researcher. I knew that she had answers. I was resistant principally because, for 20, 25 years, I'd been told by doctors and nutritionists to follow, a low-fat program, and follow the Eat Well plate, and a much higher carb intake than what I'd been taking before. Don't eat red meat, only eat lean meat, and
soy products.
Oh yes, sorry, and don't eat dairy. Listen, I was brought up on a farm. We had our own cow, right? So don't eat dairy. It's terribly bad for you. Eat soy. Well, my thyroid doesn't thank that nutritionist for that bit of advice, but I'll leave that to the side. And I ate very little dairy, and what I ate, and I love dairy products. What I ate was low fat, i.e. high sugar. So for 20 years solid, I followed this advice from the doctors and nutritionists, and 20 years later, that's actually how it manifested itself in the story I've just told you.
Yeah. Wow. What other signs and symptoms ended up getting better once you guys started down this path?
Well, one of the amazing things is the brain fog for both of us, actually. And, it kind of keeps on improving. It wasn't just after a week or two, I really feel bright and even more intelligent. You can concentrate better. It's for a long period, you just kind of feel better and better the longer you do it.
I think for me, the brain fog was a big one. I could never have even thought about writing anything for our book before. I couldn't concentrate that long. I also lost weight. I wasn't terribly heavy, but I lost some weight. It was good news. My clothes fitted properly. What else? sorry, there was something that actually went in my mind. I've just been talking about brain fog, but there were many. Oh yes, I remember exactly what I was going to tell you. Was that chronic tiredness? The tiredness, the fatigue was just chronic. It was there. It was just there. I mean, you felt like not getting up in the morning. I've never been particularly brilliant in the morning, but I mean, you just didn't feel like getting up. It was just this chronic tiredness, which was actually really quite depressing. And that's the other thing, mood. Your mood is very affected by your condition of health. And, that's one thing that I really, really noticed, was that my mental health improved immeasurably. I could think positively. We all know things happen every day which are negative. I mean, you talked about it. It's sort of the influence of advertising, etc., which if you happen to be in that environment, you're seeing. But that my mood was completely different. And I just had masses more energy. I'm a grandmother. I like playing with my grandkids. By that, I mean, I like being out in the park playing with them and, playing table tennis or football or whatever they're playing. And I had lost all that ability to do. So I think it's really important. My strong message is you need to take control of your own health.
Yeah, no, I love that. If this were the first time I had ever heard of somebody going low carbohydrate, and I heard some of those things, I would think you were exaggerating. I would think that what you're saying is a coincidence, or you're misremembering things. It's not exactly quite right. There's no way you could ignore all of the advice and have all of those improve all at once. That makes no sense until you do this for a while. And then everybody says the same thing. Like, it happens across the board. It's amazing.
Absolutely. I mean, we look at, some of our clients, and they start off in exactly the same place as I started off. So it's perfectly fine actually for them to think that it's not going to work. And how could it possibly work? And within days, they're starting to feel better. I mean, the improvements are still continuing. I mean, obviously I'm getting older, but I'm actually starting to feel quite a bit younger. So you go, well, how does that seesaw work? And I mean, it's now 5 years probably since I started on the low carb program. I notice differences every month, just in energy levels. And people, they want to have their energy. They do.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're chasing it with energy drinks and whatever hits of sugar they can get during the day because they don't have the right information. Somebody even just yesterday was asking me about why I chose to go the route of coaching with low carbohydrate. And he knows somebody who's going to a dietetic school and is getting all the advice, the lean protein, lots of vegetables and fruits and all the grains you're supposed to be eating. And she's in the middle of all of that and learning all of that. And he was asking me, so why did you take this other route? And it's like, we did that. I did that for most of my career and it didn't work. Nobody got better. If anybody could even practically pull it off, it wouldn't be for very long. They would have a terrible regain. And it never worked. And so just selfishly, job quality, like waking up and serving my clients and having good success with my clients is more than enough evidence to keep me on this path for the rest of my life, because it's like you can't find anybody that it doesn't work for. And the results are seemingly miraculous with everybody.
I think you're absolutely right, Casey. This is a lifestyle program. It's what you want your lifestyle to be.
Yeah.
And I think once people understand that, once I understood that actually, it was quite helpful. I mean, as I said before, I was resistant, and I resisted for some considerable time.
Yeah.
I didn't just on day one go, yes, this is it. I would say, we're eating a bit too much fat. And Estrelita said, no, keep eating the fat. I said, yeah, there's quite a lot of red meat. She said, no, keep eating it. Keep eating it. And, I mean, the difference now, I mean, I luckily we don't have the photograph, but if I have a photograph of what I looked like 5 years ago and what I look like now, you wouldn't actually recognize the person that I was 5 years ago.
That's amazing. Yeah.
I look ill.
I see that all the time. Yeah, that's amazing. Okay, so we've already mentioned several of them, but maybe we could just kind of go back and concisely talk about some of the myths that you learned in nutrition. We talked about the fat, the red meat. Maybe we could talk about animal products versus plant product. I don't know. What are some of the major myths that you want people to understand? Again, even if we've already covered a few of them, let's talk about some of those as far as it pertains to nutrition.
Yeah. Well, the first one, I think the key thing there is the fat and cholesterol. I find that that's the strongest obstacle, so to speak. Usually most people know that sugar is not good. Most people know that, but then people don't understand what is carbohydrates. They think just sugar is bad. You know, the white stuff that we maybe put in our tea or coffee. Yes, of course that's sugar, but there's so much more. You know, sugar comes in 30 different names. People don't know how to read the food labels and what all these chemical substances are, you know. It's confusing. A lot of that's just sugar and other chemical and toxins that's in the food. People don't understand that starch, for instance, break down to glucose, you know. And people, and I didn't know of the high carbohydrate level in fruit and root vegetables and stuff like that, in rice, you know, flour, you know. Those things are not nutritious food. And I had no concept of what nutrient-dense food was, no concept. And most people don't understand that because everybody believes in calories. That's another myth. Calories in, calories out. Our body doesn't know what calories are. It doesn't respond to calories, you know. Our body works with hormones, and hormones respond to the chemical structure of the food components, whether it's glucose or fructose or ketones or, you know, fatty acids. That's what our body understands. But calories in and calories out, you know, that drives the whole industry, the diet industry. That's what people believe they need to do. So they think they can eat what they want, and then they can go to the gym and they can burn a few calories, and that will neutralize. You know, yes, I've had the cake or the pizza. I'll just go to the gym, burn a few calories, and it's going to neutralize it. Yeah. That's not how our metabolism works. So, you know, and I'm sure, you know, you've heard the expression, you cannot outrun a bad diet.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. No, that was very well explained. And I've noticed the same thing. It's like, I love the way that Gary Taubes explains that if you're talking about calories in, calories out, and it's basically the same way of saying, like, if you want to get wealthy, just make sure you have more money than you spend. It's like, that didn't really tell you anything. You're right. Your body doesn't have calorie sensors. It's not going to get you the right information. It's not going to show you what your plan is. It's just going to be something that's going to spiral out of control and probably kill your metabolism and make you gain weight on the back end.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's part of the misinformation, you know, and you know, we know how the food and drinks industry already, you know, impacted academia and publications and so on, and the way that they influence research, so-called research that come out of academic, very reputable academic institutions that spread the lies, you know, of the food and drink industry, which is extremely sad. This has been uncovered. This has been reported, you know, that researchers have been paid by, you know, famous companies like Coca-Cola and other companies to write papers to say, well, you know, it's take the focus away from the sugar because They're very, very vulnerable on the sugar issue. Let's just blame it on people being lazy and they don't exercise enough. Just shift the focus. And we all believe that, oh yes, it's because I'm lazy and I'm sitting on the sofa and,
I've always said that like money isn't really everything. Maybe money is that awesome. Maybe it's that cool to have that much money that you will just poison a population with bad information and pay people off. Like, is that worth money? Like, how do you sleep at night? It's crazy.
Well, it's a very cynical way to look at the world, but what do we make of it? Because these companies are producing food and drink items that's really poisoning the metabolic system of millions and millions of people. They're very profitable and they do everything to put out more products, and they're very clever in their advertising, how they advertise their products. They shift the focus. For instance, they shift it away from the sugar and say, oh, there's added vitamins in our cereal. There's vitamin A, there's vitamin D. It's good for you. You just don't know how much sugar you're getting in with that. And there was it a court case here in the UK? I think, Issy, you told me a while ago, where the company said, well, it's not true that, the cereals are just bad because the people didn't take into account the milk that you take in with the cereal. So the cereal can be bad. At least, you take the milk in. I mean, they will say anything.
It's bananas. Yeah, I hope the top level executives who are responsible for those kinds of things really are enjoying tons and tons and tons of money. If that's worth it, awesome. You mentioned nutrient density earlier, which I really love. And somebody unfamiliar with this way of eating, they might think, okay, nutrient density, I'm thinking almonds, I'm thinking kale, I'm thinking, the fruits and vegetables. How surprised were you to learn that nutrient density can really be found in animal products, and full fat animal products at that? We've been talking about like really, skim milk or low fat milk or no fat milk, like actually adding in some of the plant proteins and fats. Were you surprised to learn that was actually where the nutrient density is?
Yeah, it definitely. I'm very interested in human evolution. I was always, and to just see how humans evolved over the last 5 to 7 million years, and we evolved to become meat eaters, and when humans, the human lineage split off from the chimpanzees and the gorillas 5 to 7 million years ago, the very early hominins were plant eating, okay, because that's where they came from. But around about 3.5 million years ago, humans became carnivores. And it was because in animal protein, we have all the amino acids that we need for proteins. You don't find it in plant protein. And animal protein and fat also contains all the micronutrients, all the minerals, and all the vitamins that we need in the correct format. Although you may get vitamin A in plant material, it's not in the retinol form, which is the correct form for the body to absorb them in. So you get a much lower absorption, the same with beta carotene and so on, much lower absorption, heme iron. So all the food that we need, we find from animal products, and that's what they describe as nutrient dense. You can eat the same amount of plant-based material or even more, and you will not have all the nutrients, and you will not have all the nutrients in the correct form for the body to be able to absorb. So that was something new for me. I never knew about nutrient dense food. And, for us, that's changed our diet, and now eat a good animal-based diet. We find that you don't have to eat so much. The portions are much smaller and you feel full because, it's satiating. You don't need to eat a lot. But if you go the other way and you go the plant way, and it's plant food is very high in carbs and it's got protein as well. But because of the effect on insulin, you feel hungry all the time. So the more carbohydrates you eat, the more your glucose spike up and down because of the function of insulin, and that drives hunger. So you feel that you need to eat more and more and more, and you never get enough if you're on a high carb diet. It's just the way it is.
I would never want to go back to those days. I remember them very, very clearly, of just being so hungry all the time. And you're right, like once you start eating this way, you really don't need to eat a lot. I love that you mentioned the way we evolved. We've talked to so many different paleoarchaeologists on the show, people that study this, write reports like Dr. Mickey Bendor, but somebody could just as easily go to your website, to your blog, where you very simply and creatively lay that all out with really interesting pictures and animations that I think would really help people. So I love that you did that on your website. And so for the listener, make sure you go check them out. I believe it's your website is wellnesseq.net, correct?
That's correct, yes.
Yeah, we'll link that in the notes. I do want to talk to you about your book. Who came up with the title? I absolutely love the title.
She did.
Estrelita.
Well, I think I dreamt it, Casey, because, after writing the book, we thought, what are we going to call this book? And we thought we need to call it something to maybe make people sit up because, of the amount of misinformation. And it just came to me. Usually early morning, I get kind of a few bright sparks, and it just came, eat well or die slowly. And the die slowly is because of the chronic diseases, the insidiousness of insulin resistance. And it takes years to decades for many of these diseases to develop. And, just people then develop these diseases like type 2 diabetes, and then they take more and more and more medication every year. And I thought, they're dying slowly because they're not addressing the underlying condition. Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you a funny story. I had a Zoom call one day with one of our clients. And she said, you need to talk to my husband because he's got diabetes and this and that. And I wish he just would listen to you. So she brought him on the call, and I could see this guy was really reluctant. He didn't want to talk to me. And I said, well, how are you? I said, how do you feel? Are you healthy? Or, have you got issues and so on? And he looked me in the eye and he said, I am very healthy. Thank you. Oh, okay. I said, okay, that's good. I said, are you perhaps taking any medication? He said, yes, I'm on 7 different drugs. He started explaining to me, he's on a statin, of course, he's on 2 or 3 diabetic medications. He's taking something for his heart, and on it goes. And I thought, my goodness, and this guy believes that he's fine because he's on the meds. So he's ticking all the boxes and he's doing the best for himself. But, Casey, what we found is, there are some people that you can talk to and are open, at least to think about something different, and are open to maybe try something new. And then there are other people that are absolutely closed and they're not prepared to make any effort or to change how they think about things. And that's really a sad part, but we have to accept not everybody's going to want to change.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. I learned that lesson all the time. You get so excited, like you really do want to help people out there. You want to share the message. And I'm used to people. So people book me through a carnivore website and they're already like pro carnivore. They're already interested in the diet. So I don't need to do any persuasion or convincing for those people. But I saw somebody in my neighborhood made a post on the 1st of the month that she said, like, finally, my vegan experiment for the month of January is over. I need a piece of meat. Where do I get good barbecue around here? And I sent her a message, something about carnivore, and I could tell I tried to suggest it in a really nice way, but I pushed it too far. Well, that was not somebody that was ever going to be open to any information I could help her with. And so I felt really bad afterwards. And I have to remember, like, yeah, we want to share the message, but we need to make sure that people are ready to hear it. We're sharing it with the right people at the right time. And who knows, maybe the title of your book will grab this guy's attention somewhere down the road, and he'll realize, like, yeah, what she told me will actually make sense. I am dying slowly.
Yeah, and for some, actually, it's a faster journey than others for their ill health. So I think it's, you know, people come to it at the right time. I think I agree completely with Estrelita. I mean, for me, I was desperate. I make no bones about it. I was desperate. So I didn't have, you know, a closed mindset to this. I was open.
Yeah. You have to be very sick or suffering to want to try this.
Yes.
Yeah, generally speaking. Okay, awesome. You guys do such a great job of making with your two latest books, the cookbooks are absolutely beautiful. And on your website, all your content, you guys make the making of the food look so simple yet very, very delicious. How are you able to pull that off?
Well, I actually I've been more responsible for the food aspect of it, which there is a bit of a backstory there, actually, because many moons ago, when I first got married, my mother-in-law actually gave me a how to cook simple meals, well, which probably described my cooking skills, and I would agree that she probably was right. But however, it wasn't a very subtle message, but it does describe to you how, you know, I really wasn't that interested. However, I became much more interested actually when I realized it affected my health, and I really studied what was delicious, what tasted good, and what was actually simple to prepare, because nobody has the time to make. If you're asking them to stop eating fast food, you have to then actually create your own fast food. So people want to have simple, nutritious recipes, and we had a great time researching that. Absolutely great time, and made it fun. And we tried to instill that within our cookbooks, is to just make this fun. And when your health is improving at the same time, it is fun.
That's great. Estrelita, were you the main beneficiary of that? You were getting all the food that Issy was cooking up for the cookbook?
Oh, it was absolutely lovely while working on the books, because we had to prepare all the meals. We couldn't put it in the cookbook without, making sure it works and adjusting and making, it taste good, and absolutely great. And I mean, you need ideas. You need ideas how to do this. What else can I do? In the beginning, we had breakfast and lunch and dinner, kind of the 3 meals a day. But it's very interesting, and I think it happened to many people that's on a low carb or a carnivore diet, is because you don't eat a lot of food, you also don't need to eat so frequently. So I was always a breakfast person, always, my whole life. I had to have the cereal or the porridge and so on. And that's gone. I don't need it any longer. Always had to have a meal in the evening, maybe a little bit of cheese or something, but no, don't need that. So actually the time spent in the kitchen overall, preparing and so on, has decreased, because you can really cook, good nutritious food, high density food, real products, very quickly. I mean, of course, we also do like slow cooking, put it in a slow cooker and so on. Doesn't take that much time. You just put it in the morning, and by lunchtime you have a beautiful meal. So there's so many ways to do it. And if people say, well, I'm a professional, I don't have time. I just don't have time to stand in the kitchen. Well, you don't need a lot of time. Do you have 15 or 20 minutes? You just need to have the correct produce in your fridge.
Yeah.
So you need to plan, you need to go and do your shopping. Maybe you need to go a little bit more to the shops to get the fresh food, because you don't have things that, you keep in the cupboard that's months and sometimes years old. Processed food, you can keep that forever.
Yeah.
You just organize for your supermarket deliveries to come more frequently so as you get fresh produce. So there are all sorts of ways where you can actually save time. But what we've found in this food aspect is that once people actually understand the benefit, they love the cooking. And we've worked with people who don't cook at all. I understand those people quite well.
Well, that was going to be my next question, actually, is it's such a barrier of entry. People can't eat well oftentimes because they don't know basic skills of how to cook. So I'm glad you kind of talk about that and keep things, again, as simple as possible. It doesn't take, a chef school for 6 years to learn some of this stuff.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I know people who are absolutely fantastic cooks. They have, trained and everything else. And, I love their meals too. But, the greatest way to get people to follow this program is for it to be simple. And, the slow cooker is a revelation for that, because frankly, actually, you just throw, the ingredients in and, however many hours later, it's ready. You haven't really done very much. You've just actually bought the produce and thrown it in, and then maybe had some vegetables on the side. So I think I agree with you there. I mean,
yeah.
And I think Issy has also devised quite a few one-pot cooking, for nice fish dishes and so on. You can do it all in one pot. Really 10, 15 minutes, absolutely delicious meal. You don't have a lot of dishes and wash up to do afterwards. So it's a very effective and efficient way to eat, spend much less time, really, if you know what to do.
Much less time.
Much less time.
Much less time. Taste changes, simple, seasonings, like even just salt tastes amazing. Like the money you save, the money alone, like pay yourself hourly, whatever money you save on your food in a month, and you'll have a nice little allowance there.
Well, people always say, oh, you can't expect people to buy that kind of food, it's too expensive. But just compare that to a basket full of processed food and real food. It's not that different if you add it up. Or if you go to McDonald's and you take your family there for the hamburgers, the chips, and the Coca-Cola, and add it all up, how much are they paying? And think what you can buy for that money in real food terms.
Yeah. Such a good point. I love that. And we've already mentioned this, but the accessibility, you have lots of different diet types that people can follow as long as they're addressing some of that processed food and getting some of the carbohydrates out of the diet. I could do that on carnivore. Other people could include produce, like you said. Like, it's not that big of a deal as long as they do okay with it. Like, you can do fine on pescatarian. There's lots of different options. So I love that you provide all of that accessibility for your people. Are you planning on doing any other cookbooks?
Sorry, I laughed nervously. We started off with the meat cookbook because that's where we were at the time. We were actually asked to produce seafood and vegetarian for people who are perhaps more pescatarian. So we did that. Actually, it was a very, very interesting exercise, and I loved it. I love both books, actually. Currently, we don't have any plans for any more. The experimentation time seems to have left me a little bit, but it doesn't mean to say that we won't. I never say never. So we may, but I think it's unlikely at the moment.
But a very interesting point when we did the vegetarian book, not that either of us lean towards that at all, but one of the things that we put the carb count for every recipe there per portion, and you can see on the vegetarian side how much higher it is, just because you don't have the animal products, because the animal products just bring the carb count right down to almost zero.
Wow. Yeah, it sounds like a challenge. It sounds possible, definitely doable for somebody, but it is more challenging.
Much more challenging. I think, I think this is not for vegans. I can't see a vegan ever following this kind of program. There are a lot of challenges if you're a vegan, from a nutritional point of view. There's a lot of misinformation, unfortunately. And I don't know if you saw, I wrote a short blog on environment and agriculture, because a lot of the misinformation is about how animal farming damaged the environment. Well, it's actually the other way around.
Absolutely.
And farming and agriculture is not, if you look at the global greenhouse gas production and so on, it's minute. If you compare that to other industries. But that's just another of the myths, that's pushed forward by the whole vegetarian movement.
Yeah, it keeps the money-making machine going. If that's part of the message, you're going to be eating lots of meals and snacks. You're going to be going to the doctor and having lots of medications, and you're in the system. And what you guys have created with Eat Well and Die Slowly is such a different paradigm shift. And I absolutely love the title. I love your work. I'm so grateful for both of you that you were able to come on today and discuss everything that you've learned. I'm so happy for both of you to have an amazing life playing with grandkids and really just thriving and reverse aging like everybody else in this world is so amazing. Anybody who goes to low carb, it just seems like they get younger and younger as the years go on. It's like Benjamin Button. It's amazing.
Yeah, honestly, it is extraordinary. It is extraordinary.
Fantastic.
Well, I just want to say, I love your enthusiasm, Casey. I love what you do, to make this information accessible to people right around the world. So doing a good job there.
Absolutely.
Well,
spreading the message. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you both so very much. I feel like I don't even know if I'm matching your enthusiasm. You guys are so enthusiastic about this stuff. I absolutely love it. So thank you again so very much for coming on to our show. Where would you like people to go to find you and connect with you in your work?
I think that the best way would be on our website, wellnesseq.net. Most of our information is on there about the work that we do. In fact, all of our information is on there about the work that we do. And our books the links to our books are actually also on our website. I can send you the links for Amazon in the US, because they're obviously we're UK based. So I can happily send you the links for all of our books on the US site, so you can pop that up with our podcast.
Yeah, amazing. We can include all of that in the show notes. Estrelita and Issy, thank you so very much for everything that you do. Like I said, I really appreciate your work. I'm so glad you made this approachable and simple for people, and that you're out there changing lives. So thank you so very much for everything you do. And thank you for coming on our show today. We really appreciate you.
Thank you, Casey.
Thanks a lot.
Absolutely. And this has been another episode of Boundless Body Radio.